All right, I think it's time. I think we can do this, right? It's been a while, but we can get back into this, right? That's not a problem. Let's do this. Let's have some fun here, right? There we are. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it might be in your part of the world. Welcome back to the live stream. My name is Jeff Fritz, and we're going to be talking about .NET Aspire and .NET development today, answering your questions. We've got a bunch of time available so that we can talk about .NET Aspire. We can talk about how to use various components with it. I want to go back and revisit where we are with our Big Bad blog series. It's been a while, friends, since we've been together, and I want to go back and recap and get us back up to date, ready to go, and ready to start building again. We've had a bunch of events that have happened since we were last together. We had our .NET Developer Aspire Day, where we talked about .NET Aspire. We had a full day of events. There's all kinds of great videos available for you from that event over on the .NET YouTube channel. I want to make sure you know about those. You check those out. I'm looking forward to talking to you today. We've got all kinds of time to answer your questions, to talk about things that are going on with .NET as we're getting ready for .NET 9. We're getting ready for the next version of .NET Aspire. I want to hear from you. I want to talk to you, answer your questions, and get us moving in the right direction here so that you can be successful, not just with .NET, but .NET Aspire, building your applications that you want to deploy and run in the cloud, and talk a little bit further today also about Keycloak and some of the other components that we're adding into our .NET Aspire solution here that we're calling the Big Bad blog. How are you doing, chat room? I see a few folks hanging out. Hello. You can sound off there in the chat room, and we'll have a little bit of an Ask Me Anything segment, as we always do, to get things started. I've got a cup of coffee here to get me warmed up and ready for the day. I was writing some of our samples last night. Some things didn't go entirely the way I wanted. They were a little bit more complex than I was looking for, and I've gone back and I'm refactoring them. I'm not going to go through the entire set of demos that I had planned for today. We'll do more with that next week. Next week, of course, is .NET Conf Focus on AI. So we have an event on Tuesday that we want to make sure that you tune into, where we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence and how you can use that with .NET. All the tools that you're familiar with, that you know and love, you're going to learn a whole lot more about how you can use large language models and some of the AI tools that are out there that you've been hearing about from some of our friends in the Python and JavaScript communities. You're going to see how you can use them with your .NET solution next week on Tuesday the 20th. We've got a whole lot planned for that. I want to make sure that you know about it, that you tune in, you check it out. Head on over to focus.netconf.com and you can learn more about that event. We've got is it 15? I think it's 15 events, 15 sessions scheduled for that day. All kinds of topics, with a keynote starting at the beginning of the day from Scott Hanselman, Maria Nagaga, talking about some of the cool things that are coming and happening in .NET with artificial intelligence, so that you can ramp up and be ready to go and add some smarts, some intelligence into your applications. So we've been planning and working towards that event. We had the .NET Aspire Developers Day event a couple weeks ago. Personally, I've had a bunch of changes in my life as my kids are heading out to college. My sound is low. Really? How's that? A little bit better? So we've had a busy summer here in the Fritz house. So I can tell you that we're going to have some time next week. We're going to go through and we're going to do more with this authentication and setting up authorization as part of this. There you go, bit better, good. I have a different configuration that I was using for a recording yesterday, and I needed to readjust this microphone. So we've got a couple weeks here where we're going to do more we're going to do more discussion around authentication, authorization. We're going to set up and work on adding telemetry, creating our own components with .NET Aspire that get added to the Big Bad Blog application system as we build that out, and we tell more of this story of adding capabilities to a very simple blog engine that started off as just a bunch of markdown on disk. And now we have a Mongo database, we have a Postgres database, and there's more that's growing and happening that's going to enhance this application system. The source for this, you can always get the source code for this if you're watching on YouTube. I believe, yep, there's a link. There is a link on the YouTube description. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find that just below. Let me pop open and grab that GitHub link really quick here. So the Big Bad Blog series that we've been writing, that we've been building out here together, is intended to be, there's the source code for you, is intended to be a very simple getting started, migrate an existing application to start using distributed application features. Start picking up and doing more with a website than just, here's the content that's inside my project. Let's add additional projects so that we can do things like set up microservices, set up minimal APIs that interact with different things, set up database to connect to, set up Keycloak, set up an authentication server, an identity provider that you can connect to and work with. We're going to set up Service Bus in the coming weeks. And there's more that we're going to learn and add into this as we go along and we grow this application system. Check it out there. There's a ton of documentation that goes with it. I still haven't finished writing the documentation for episode 3. But all the episodes in the series are available in this playlist. Check it out just down below or over on the side, depending on what YouTube app you're using. You'll find it there, and you'll be able to click through and see the other episodes in the Big Bad Blog series. So, I don't see any questions coming through. How are you doing, chat room? Let me know. I see a bunch of folks watching. This is an interactive. This is an interactive session where we get to talk together and build stuff together. I don't just sit here and write code for you to watch and learn. We talk about things. We do stuff together. It's really great to do that. There we go. Steven on YouTube. Good to see you. Hello. Jay is here on YouTube as well. Is it Ungok? I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Philippe, hello. Welcome. DJ Deepex, there's a friend on Twitch. Good to see you. I think Steven's a regular as well. Hello, but let me bring up the chat here. Now, right? This one should do it. There's the chat room right there. Stephen asks, is it possible to use Visual Studio Code? Let me also bring up I'm going to bring up the AMA clock there. Is it possible to use Visual Studio Code to deploy a SWA, a static web app, using Blazor WebAssembly to Azure? Does it create all of the necessary parts for the A in Azure? For the A in Azure, does it create all of the necessary parts for the deployment? So here's the deal: when you're working with static web apps, so static web apps are a great architecture that you can use to build applications that don't have any moving parts on the server, right? Typically, when we build an ASP.NET application, maybe we build a Node application or build a Python application, Django application. You've got a server that's doing a whole bunch of things. The static web app doesn't have a server. It's just serving content that's going to be rendered and managed in the browser. The server is literally dumb. It's just sending files. Let me get some music playing in the background here, and I'll talk a little bit more about static web apps. This is the Stream Beats Synthwave playlist. I'm going to scroll down here, and let me see. Let me find one. This is called... no, keep going. This is called -1. This is music that's DMCA free. It's royalty free. Use it wherever you'd like on the internet. Check it out at streambeats.com. Big thanks to Harris Heller and his team of creators for creating this music we're listening to today. So it's kind of groovy to have in the background, this synthwave playlist. So when you're creating a static web app on Azure, what you're going to find is that it's creating and allocating, it wants to allocate functions. Not only functions, but it's going to allocate some disk space, a dumb server that's just going to echo the HTML, the content that you've written in your application. The way to do this, the best way to do this, is to create, especially with Blazor, is to clone an existing template, and it will have all of the GitHub actions built in there for you. The other way to do this is going to be to go out to Azure, create the static web app there, and it will allocate it will connect to the appropriate GitHub repository for you. Creating it from within Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code is not the easiest way to do it. So it sounds like you've already got a Visual Studio Code set of projects built in that editor. So what I'm going to tell you to do is is to go to the template on GitHub. Let me bring it up here in my browser, and I'll give you the link for this. I believe it's Blazor-SWA. But I'm gonna suggest to you, there it is, static web dev generate. Yep, Blazor starter. Static web dev dash Blazor starter. Standby. Blazor starter. What you're going to end up doing here, there's the link. What you're going to end up doing here is going in and that gives you all the code. And there's also directions in there for what to do when you're in Visual Studio Code. You're going to want the Azure, there, thank you. You're going to want the Azure Functions emulator to run locally as well. There's also a command line tool. But you're going to need to go over to the Azure Static Web Apps, set that up, connect it to your GitHub repository, and it will automatically generate the deployment scripts for you, the GitHub actions, so that it deploys appropriately. That said, there are a couple of demo repositories that have those already sitting out there ready for you to learn from. I have older versions for like my Hats website that are out there that I don't think are up to date because the new samples and things use .NET 8 and my code is .NET 7. So Marcus makes a very good point. Static web apps can be free to host. Can be free. Because there's no moving parts, the servers just echo the content that you're hosting. So up to, I forget how much, there's a limit on bandwidth that you're allocated for free that you can use. Up to that limit, no cost. The functions that you write, the Azure functions that you write, I think it's like 1 million executions you get a month. Don't quote me on that. You can take a look at the Azure pricing website for static web apps. It is a crazy number of executions per month that you get for free with Azure static web apps. Once you cross that, it's like 10,000 executions for a penny or something like that. It's very, very low price. The Azure functions should be the low end of what you're allocating and spending money on in hosting. Where you're going to start to feel a little bit of a challenge is in the static content you're sending. You're going to want to do things to set up aggressive caching. You're going to want to compress things. You're going to want to set up, not just compress things, but you're going to want to uglify and minify your code that's being served so that you can minimize the bandwidth of folks coming through. That being said, it's not until you start getting a decent amount of traffic that you're going to start to see some real bills coming in. on Azure Static Web Apps. It's a really good service to get started and build a hobby project on, and do something that is pretty easy to do. How you doing there? Armin is here on YouTube. Welcome. Second question, why is the Blazor development team, why don't they add a progressive web app option for Blazor web app, like the one in Blazor WebAssembly standalone app and Blazor web app? It's a good question. I'm happy to answer that. So there used to be a add manifest capability to it. And as I take a look, I'm just going to open Visual Studio here on the side and take a quick peek. And if I just go to start one, I thought there was, yeah, the checkbox for it is no longer there. Quite frankly, they could add the ability, they could add a checkbox to allow you to do progressive web app optimizations, to allow you to generate the manifest, to allow you to generate some of the other resources for it. With a typical Blazor application, though, a Blazor web application, you're rendering and you're pre-rendering, you're doing a lot of work on the server. And the progressive web app that's not exactly where you want to be. So the Blazor web app template right now really is optimized for having an active server in the process. So building the Blazor WebAssembly standalone app is going to get you more of that progressive web app capability that you're looking for. Being able to run things offline, caching things offline, using the browser to its full extent by optimizing things for WebAssembly. The Blazor web app template really is more optimized for having an active server that WebAssembly is augmenting and is getting the benefits of pre-rendering, is getting the benefits of having active APIs out there that it's interacting with. So the Blazor web app really is a little bit of a different type of project. And the WebAssembly template is going to give you those capabilities. They can certainly add the PWA checkboxes, to be sure, but it's not in good faith the type of project that you probably want out of it. Does the WebAssembly template have that checkbox? Let me take a quick peek here. I think it does. Blazor WebAssembly standalone app. Yes, that one does. The Blazor WebAssembly standalone app does. And that's the type of application model that will give you a bit more of that highly browser optimized set of interactions that you want to set up and optimize for, because you want that progressive web app that runs primarily in the browser, not on the server. Let me see here. You still use Visual Studio for doing the publish? Okay. Nothing wrong with that. I try to encourage more folks to use scripts, use scripted continuous deployment like GitHub Actions. They're free to use. Unless you've got some very large, complicated process, GitHub Actions are free to use. Set them up so that you have a consistent deployment process. When you're in Visual Studio, you can save the publish script as a GitHub action, and you'll always have that deployment run the same way. That also frees you off from being tied down to your developer workstation for deployments. So if you're on the road, you want to use a different machine, your colleague Skippy needs to help you out with the project, you can even set up a GitHub code space that they can connect into, make their updates, make the commitment, and it will deploy the exact same way that you've always deployed from GitHub, and not from some glorified blessed machine that has all the right configuration to deploy to Azure. So nothing wrong with publishing from Visual Studio, but getting that deployment script in a continuous integration location and server that will do all of those things is going to help you with consistency It's going to help you share that burden with the rest of your team, if you have a team, for that matter. You're using Azure Static Web App extension in Visual Studio Code. Is that good to use also? Should be. Yep. Continuing here, Jay on YouTube asks, comments, it's a shame we can't have interactive server-side abilities for free so we can produce portfolio apps for people to see. You can, Jay. So there is a basic application that you can set up using Azure App Service. You'll get 60 minutes of compute a day that you get for free for those types of portfolio applications, stuff that you want to run in a dev test environment that you are just building and putting out there to show that you built a cool application. That said, if you do have significant traffic coming through, yeah, you're going to have to, at the very least, buy a small version of the service, $15, $20 a month for a small instance. It's not too bad. I forget what they call the smallest instance, but that developer shared instance to put out there and be able to interact with for a portfolio site, you should be just fine. On the other side, you can run it as an Azure Container app and set it to have a minimum of 0 instances, and it's not actually running when nobody's requesting it. It'll start up quickly, interact with, do the things that you've requested, and then shut down, and you only pay for the amount of processor that you use. And if it's just a portfolio site, you'll spend a lot less than that $15, $20. So on YouTube, eWolf says, wait, so even though you can run components client-side on a Blazor web app, it's not as good as Blazor WASM. So running components client-side with the Blazor web app is Blazor WebAssembly. The Blazor WebAssembly project has no moving parts on the server. It's all straight HTML, CSS, JavaScript. The components that you build and use there are turned into a .NET assembly, deployed, referenced, and used and loaded there. So there's a difference in how you build, deploy, and where your code executes. When you run with the Blazor web app, your WebAssembly code that you've included, your client code, can be pre-rendered, and that's the default configuration. It'll be pre-rendered on the server so that it loads very, very quickly when things like a search engine crawler comes by or a social media bot comes by because somebody shared a link to your application. They'll get a pre-rendered version of your website that use that WebAssembly component you referenced. And when a human comes through, they'll get the WebAssembly version, and it'll run automatically in the browser. Sothi Saint, hello. Must you have a GitHub account, and must it cost money? You don't need to have a GitHub account, and GitHub does not cost money. Most of the features that folks use on GitHub, you can use for free. You can use GitHub Actions, store gigabytes and gigabytes of source code on GitHub for free. There's no cost to that. So go for it. Set it up and enjoy, as a developer, being able to build and share things from your GitHub repositories in your GitHub account for other folks to find, discover, and contribute to. So Marcus points out that there's a free database and a free web app tier. Yes, the free database does take a little bit of wake-up time, but for a portfolio application, you're not concerned about runtime. It works. So, hey, Jay on YouTube says, that sounds great. Maybe I can demo it sometime. Don't have significant traffic. There absolutely is documentation about the free tiers and how to set up and use those items on Azure. There you go. So there is a $200 credit for your first month of using Azure if you want to use that. But here we go. The list of free services is on that website. And you can see there's an Azure SQL database, Azure Cosmos DB, Azure Functions, 1 million requests. First million requests of the month are always free. 5 gigs of blob storage, so on and so forth. But if you go down App Service, there is, in the list here, where is it? App Service, there you go. 10 web, mobile, and API apps with 1 gig of storage for 1 hour per day in a shared model. You can set that up using Node, PHP, .NET. It's all available for you. Check it out on that website. And I have a YouTube video that shows that talks about the top free Azure services that I wrote. 60 minutes is a lot when builds well, hang on. That's not the build, right? And you're talking about for GitHub Actions, not App Service. Let me make sure. So GitHub Actions, for private repositories, you can go through that quickly, to be sure. If you're building that much, that frequently, and deploying with a GitHub action, yeah, you could burn through it quickly. That said, my accounts are on GitHub. I've never run into the limit. I came close with an application 2 years ago a couple times. I came close. I've never run into the limit. So, but I do have videos on my YouTube channel that show how to use the free services, some of my favorite free services out there that you can use on Azure. No cost, no credit card required, real easy to get set up and start using. eWolf on YouTube. This is a topic that I like. For the .NET Aspire blob storage emulator, I really wish the Azure Storage dashboard is available when you create an instance like pgadmin. Amen. Yes. In fact, I've opened an issue on the .NET Aspire repository about exactly that. Stand by. Let me grab it here. Because I think that's something that should be very cool for folks to be able to use. There's the link to the GitHub issue. It's called Azure Storage Should Expose a With Storage Explorer API. Now, there is a container out there that will do a bit of this. It's not perfect, but it's from Seba Gomez. And let me share that GitHub link. There it is. Now, this repository that I linked has a really cool user interface that was built with Blazor that will connect to your Azure storage and interact with it. I have a little bit of source code in that first issue that shows how to light up and start using the Storage Explorer that I defined inside my project, and our friend David Fowler has some sample code there to clean that up and show how to connect it. But that sample should get you most of the way there to do that kind of thing, eWolf. I'm going to warn you, though, the Blob Storage Explorer that's made available by that container isn't great. I think there's some pull requests I see from folks that have gone in there, that are hanging out there to help out, but there hasn't been a lot of activity on that project. So I would encourage you to check it out. I think there's an opportunity to either contribute to this person to improve it, because it works outside of .NET Aspire. But this container working inside .NET Aspire, something isn't quite working properly. I'm not quite sure what it is. But I think there's an opportunity to help out this person and turn this container that they built. They started building it in 2009. Help make this something that's a little bit more robust and interesting to use compelling to use with .NET Aspire. So, man, I've been doing a bunch of work on the Aspirify.net website as well. You've probably seen me working on that over on my other stream. Make sure you check out Aspirify.net. That, of course, is a news hub. There you go. That we've built live on stream. The source code is not available to this, but a lot of what we've learned and built in that source code is part of the Big Bad blog series, and we're adding more of those features into it. The problem with Aspirify and being able to make that open source is, quite frankly, I bought the template, the user interface template. I bought that template from a creator, and I do not have the rights to relicense it. So I can't distribute the template, so I can't share the source code for this. So, eWolf continues. Thank you so much for chiming in here. It's important because I realized that what is the point of using Firebase or Supabase if all the features offered could be created with Aspire components? Ah, yes, right. What I find compelling, what I find interesting about working with .NET Aspire components is how easy it is to stand up and migrate and bring the entire system that you're deploying and working on, bring that entire system to another machine. Not just deploy it, right? And we're going to learn about deployment coming up here in a couple episodes. But not just deploy that system, but also to be able to take all of my configuration, bring it to another team member, and they get the exact same running configuration. There is no having a shared JSON file with configuration and options that are sitting out there that has a list of the shared development systems and pass that around between friends or have it out on a private OneDrive folder somewhere or Dropbox or hiding in a Slack channel that you download and slide into your application, and that's the final piece, so you have your developer workstation working properly. And don't forget, when you run your developer workstation, you need to start these Docker containers first before you go and actually get into debugging. No. You can just clone the repository, hit F5, and you're off and running. It's really good for that. And we all see the benefits of it at that point. Let me catch up with DJ Deepex with a question up here. When will the wait for method be included in the next version of Aspire? That is a fine question there. Some of you have seen, and did we talk about and add? Did we add wait for into this project? I don't remember. I can't remember if it was added into this. No, we didn't add wait for into the Big Bad blog. Right? No. Wait for is a feature that our friend David Fowler built to help try to order things so that it was easy to pick up and use. So that was easy to pick up and order the deployment and running order of things inside your .NET Aspire system. I thought it was, right? I thought it was in here. There it is. There is a kind of a playground out there that the team works on called Aspirant. That wait for feature is available as part of. Take a look at the Aspirant. I believe it's the hosting project. And it has, wait for dependencies in there. And the idea of wait for is, right, I want to be able to say to my website, hey, don't start up and get running until after the database is started. If the database isn't running, you can't get started yet. You can't actually do the things that you want to do yet. So making that order properly is something that you can do with this add-on that isn't an official part of the .NET Aspire framework, as DJ Deepex is pointing out. It's my understanding that the team wants that to be a little bit more of a first-class concept on ordering, building, and deploying things with .NET Aspire. So there's a little bit more thinking and planning going into how to make that something a bit more official. But if you need that type of capability, it is available now. There's the link to the repository. You can add that NuGet package to add the Aspirant hosting NuGet package to your project, and it will, come on, give me the NuGet link. There it is. And it'll give you that capability. There you go. There's the link in chat to be able to order your projects properly to work with it. Yeah, Zamphy, hello. Amen to that. Cesar on YouTube, good morning to you. Welcome. Leger, welcome in from Senegal, Africa at the .NET Developers Group. Hello. Good to see you. Great hearing from folks in Africa. I know we've got a couple folks from Europe watching. I think I saw a couple folks from North America tuning in. It's great to have a worldwide audience hanging out and helping out with as we're building and talking about things here with .NET Aspire. We're in a little bit of AMA right now, hanging out, talking about some of the things that you might be working about, some of the things you're learning about. I want to make sure that you're successful, answer some of your questions, give you some links to some things here. Yeah, greetings out to our friends in Africa. Hope you're having a fantastic afternoon. I'm here in the East Coast of the United States, enjoying a little bit of coffee, getting things started here. So we're answering your questions and hopefully getting you set and setting up for success. So we always start the stream here with a little bit of AMA to make sure that you know a little bit of what's going on and pick up and hopefully learn to be, we can get you some assistance so that you can be more successful with your project. I want to make sure that I point out, since we were last together, .NET Aspire has had an 8.1 release. They had a minor version release just a few weeks ago. I'll share the announcement blog post for that. There you go. There are a bunch of new components that are available, a bunch of new hosting components that are available, so you can add in other components to your application system. Keycloak is in a preview version that you can get there. Elasticsearch is in there. Garnet and Valkey, those are forked versions of Redis that you can get your hands on. There's a Kafka UI component that's out there. Milvus is available. That's a popular vector database that folks use. Azure Web Hub Sub, there's now support for interacting with that, and there's even an Event Hubs emulator that you can use so that you can build and test and interact with. The metrics on the dashboard have been improved, so you can see some exemplars. You can see some real data points pop up in the metrics there. There's the ability to do linking between the various spans in a trace, so you can see a little bit more about how various elements in your telemetry work together. The instance ID names, when you set up and you replicate, we had questions about what happens if you have multiple replicas of a service. There's some a little bit more sensible replica names that appear inside the structured logs that you can bounce around and look at. So really good stuff out there. There's an, I believe, I don't see the message here. Right? Yeah, there is even full support for Docker files. So if you have another project out there that you want to include that isn't .NET, you can reference a Docker file and it will build and use that Docker file directly. But there is also the ability to orchestrate and add Python code inside .NET Aspire now. Good stuff that's all available as part of .NET Aspire 8.1. Is there a plan to include Hashi Vault as a component to Aspire? I haven't heard anything about that, but that's a container that you can use. You should be able to create that and interact with that using the standard container capabilities. Right, Vault Project IO, blah, blah, blah. I thought there was a way to do this. Right, I thought there was a container that was available for you to use that you should be able to just stand up and point to. No, no, no. Hashi, Vault, and Docker. I thought there was. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, it's just called Vault. There's also the HashiCorp Vault. So you should be able to launch and get into those and use those containers directly using the standard add container syntax. I don't see any requests for it at this point. Yeah, I don't see any requests for it at this point, but I feel like that's something that would be easy for somebody in the community to build and contribute. And certainly not just contribute it to .NET Aspire, but share and contribute it back to the folks at HashiCorp so that they can upgrade, maintain it, and provide it as part of a supported solution. eWolf with a question about, will there be PG vector extension for Postgres? I haven't seen anything about that. The default Postgres that's added and used when you reference .NET Aspire, you can change the image and the image tag that's used by the Postgres component. You can modify that so that it uses a different version. And I know there's a different container version that has the vector extensions installed. That's a really good question that I think would be fun to explore. Add PG vector support to Postgres. I think there's just a couple lines of code that you can do there to make that work. Let me explore that and get back to you. I think there's a couple of interesting demos there we can put together. On YouTube, Steven says, I've been hearing from .NET developers who use Windows say that .NET on Mac OS and Linux is a cut-down version of .NET on Windows. Oh, not this again. No. .NET developers on Windows, I want to tell you, I want to make sure that you know it's the same framework. It's the same coding experience, deployment and execution experience when you get to Mac and Linux and Tizen and all kinds of other operating systems that .NET runs on. It's not a cut down experience at all. Cut down is not what our team is aiming for at all. We want you to have a magnificent experience on all of those operating systems. We want you to have a fantastic time building and working with them, and a reliable, durable experience on Mac and Linux. But of course, right, we make Windows. We want to make sure you have a great experience on Windows as well. There is no difference in the .NET 8, .NET 7, .NET 6 libraries, languages, and capabilities across those operating systems. Visual Studio Code runs the exact same way across all three sets of operating systems. Visual Studio 2022, though, is our premium IDE experience that is only available for Windows. So there are other folks out there in the community that build editors. Make sure you check out the folks at JetBrains who make Rider. They've got Rider available for you on Mac and Linux as well. We think and we've heard that Visual Studio Code is the editor that folks want to use on Mac and Linux. So, not true at all there, Stephen. Hey, Frank. Hello. Frank says, I code in .NET half-time on Linux, and it's a great experience. Totally. here's the thing. Come here, friends. A lot of folks on the .NET team code on Mac. They're building .NET on Mac. Come here. The folks on the C# team, a lot of them code on Linux machines. Take that as you will. So, it's something where we want to make sure that everybody has a great experience. And that's what makes that the entire .NET experience better. Right? This is by including those experiences, by bringing in that diverse set of experiences and ecosystems, it means that folks who are building tools for Windows, that are working with capabilities on Linux, they can see how the experience is different building and working on those different operating systems with the different tools that are available, and they can enhance and tune and improve it on this operating system so that it matches and has the same capabilities that are available on the other operating system. That's better than Max's STX? That's your opinion? There are some folks that really enjoy coding on their Mac. There are some folks that really enjoy coding on Linux. And yet, there are other folks like me that enjoy coding on Windows. That's great. Everybody is welcome. Everybody can code and use their favorite operating system, have the same great command line experience, download and use and interact with those tools wherever you might be. So, that's right. There's an option for everyone. There you go. eWolf says, I'm confused why .NET MAUI doesn't support Linux. Quite frankly, the priority for .NET MAUI is iOS and Android. And keeping up with those is a pretty significant task. And getting things, making sure that you can build and still work with Windows, building things for Mac, iOS, and Android. It's a very politicized framework because it's got those various groups that are pulling and want their own individual capabilities that are appropriate for their operating systems with their own release schedules. So makes it a very political thing to manage and work with. So the team does a pretty good job with it. Imagine running Windows, start a Linux VM and starts a Mac OS VM and coding on that. You can do that, but why? Like, why? They all behave the same. So, Hola, see you. Hello on YouTube, or is it Ola, see you? Learning.NET Aspire, deploying to Azure Container Apps, but each container costs quite a bit. I haven't even written much code yet. What do you mean containers cost a bit? Tell me more. What are you seeing there? Because the containers you're only going to be charged for as much as the container is used. And I will pull, and I'm going to do this off screen, but I'm going to go up to the Azure portal and I'm going to pull the web container for Aspirify.net. And where is it? Oh, that's the the web container app. Where is it? Go into the subscription and I can zoom in on just that. And I can tell you what's involved with that. Let's see here. Come on now. It's loading. Come on. There we go. So, Aspirify.net that has a web container that's hanging out there. cost me $28 last month to run, and that gets a bit of traffic. Gets a little bit of traffic. So the active usage was $15 that I was charged for that running last month. So you can dial that up and down so that it shuts off when it's not in use. Really good stuff that you have capabilities to configure to suit your needs. So, yeah. Do I have any suggestions for reducing costs? So there are some containers that are set up and optimized for you to deploy to Azure Container Apps in some of our demos and things. Like Redis, if you set up, there's a Redis demo and it sets up and it encourages you to put Redis into a container. If you're using Redis significantly, you don't want to put it in a container. You're going to do better with the Redis caching service. The smallest instance of the Redis caching service costs $15 a month. And then you can share it across multiple instances. You don't need to have, because that $15 a month is going to get you 250 meg storage. I have 4 websites that share one instance of Redis caching. $15 a month. Check it out. You're going to be just fine using things like that. Don't deploy the Postgres container that it set you up with. Deploy and connect to the Postgres service. Don't deploy the SQL Server container that it sets up. Connect to the burstable SQL Server service, and those will be much, much smaller in footprint. The container setup that you get by default that comes with .NET Aspire is a great experience for you on your developer workstation. When you want to deploy, there are Azure hosting packages that you can use that will reroute and configure those hosted services appropriately for you. You can add those in and it will get them set up and deploy and configure those capabilities. So, you'd rather use Linux? That's cool. STX? That's great. There are times where I absolutely prefer working on Linux, particularly when I'm building and working with containers. It is a joy to do that on Linux. I really enjoy working with that on Linux and interacting and building over there. So, yeah, I'm there with you. You created a free account, but you used up all the money in the first month. I don't know what to tell you. Take a look at how you're deploying things. There's also scale that you can configure. You don't need to let it, by default, your Azure Container Apps will run between 1 instance all the way to 10 instances. And there's a low threshold for it to start the next instances. You can control and dial that back so that it isn't starting additional containers quite as quickly. Take a look at that. I have instances, I have containers that run as part of Aspirify that have 0 replicas and only start up when I need them. So that part regarding the Redis service on Azure rather than as a container, yes, it is. Trust me on this one. Azure Cache for Redis. Taking a look, and I'm just clicking through on my invoice here. So I have the basic 250 meg instance running. I have 4 websites on it, and right now it's using 14 meg of storage. If I take a look at Redis Insight to see how much, so the Aspirify.net website aggressively output caches. Aggressively. Just about everything that you look at on Aspirify has been output cache at some point or another. And yeah, I can see somebody's been clicking through the categories, somebody clicked through into my author page. I can see these entries, and each entry sitting in the Redis cache, 10, 20K, and it's storing couple dozen entries at this point for Aspirify. It's literally nothing being stored out there, and it just cruises through it. I encourage you, check out the Redis cache, the basic instance. If I bring that, no, that's no. Folks have been buying the keywords for some of these services. For just basic caching. Doesn't have a high availability guarantee. It doesn't have any replication or failover. I'm storing 15 meg of data. Like, if it's not there, oh well, it will serve it directly. There's all kinds of options that you can light up as you buy larger instances of Redis cache. But for the typical developer that's tinkering, building a hobby website, growing something, you're going to be just fine with the basic instance. The standard grows from $16 to $40 and gives you a full gig of cache. Like 99% availability, replication and failover capabilities. That growth capability goes a long way. And right, Azure Cache for Redis, if I remember correctly, is now the only place where you can get brand name Redis. AWS, GCP have gone to serving Valkey. Whatever. I'm sure that makes people happy. So, go ahead and use that. You'll have a good time. And it behaves almost the exact same way as Redis. Right? It's intended to be very much API equivalent, API equal, something like that, right? Yeah, that says I'm connected here. Oh. Okay. We're good on that. Continuing here, let me keep up with a couple more of these comments here. So you have to put in if development, if the containers, and if production. No, you don't. No. There are different options available there. No. If you configure your project in Azure really well, Azure isn't that expensive. Right. So some of the default configuration that's given is intended to get that's provided is intended to give you on Azure a wide berth so that your application system can grow. That said, for a typical developer, there are tips to shrink that footprint and not have that, not use some of those more higher end services. Great example. When you decide to add Azure storage to a .NET Aspire project, it gives you the globally redundant storage SKU by default. Globally redundant storage is a little bit more expensive than local redundant storage, LRS. This is GRS versus LRS. LRS keeps additional copies of your data somewhere else in the same data center. Globally redundant storage keeps copies on another data center somewhere else. That way, if there's a problem with this data center, you can still get that. There isn't, Richard, and I feel like that's something that we can do something about. And I will take that as a content item to go after. But there's options there, and you can add a configuration into your .NET Aspire app host to force the appropriate SKU for your Azure storage, so that you do get the local redundant storage, and it will save you a couple bucks in how you deploy and work with queues, blobs, tables out there on Azure, right? If I were to go, let me see if I can bring it up real quick on my browser here. Azure storage pricing page. Oh, they changed the website for me. Oh, that's nice. Local redundant storage for the first terabyte is 15 cents per gigabyte. If I change that to the global redundant storage, is Wait, I did that wrong. That's the premium. I'm sorry. The hot storage is 1.8 cents per gigabyte, not 15 cents. 1.8 cents per gigabyte versus 3.7 cents. So it's for global redundant storage. So it's twice as expensive to do global redundant storage because there's another data center somewhere that has a copy of your stuff. So you're paying for it at least twice to be sitting out there versus the local redundant storage, and it's still in the same data center. So options that are available for you that can help you save a couple bucks. If you're developing on a limited budget, make sure you don't leave your services running at the end of the day. Totally. Make sure you shut down those services. So use the dev test stuff when possible. Those resources are much, much cheaper. Yes. Ola CU says, I just created an Aspire example, deployed it to Azure for a regular website. I could use a free web app, but the cost of the container application shocked you. So here's the deal. Let's dial into that a little bit. You can deploy an application that you build with .NET Aspire to App Service. It's not built into the AZD tool. However, you can use the same deployment scripts that you would use with App Service, and then you can deploy it to a free instance. So let me take that as these are great questions. I'm going to go build some content later and not during the stream, and we'll get some blog posts, we'll get some entries out there, some videos to show you how to do some of this, because these are these are good questions, and I want to make sure that you're successful with them. DJ Deepex with a question here: do I need additional licenses when running a non-Microsoft product on Azure? Depends. There are different licenses and different different licenses and different arrangements with different products. Redis is a good example where Azure has paid for the licenses for you. You don't need to buy additional licenses. I believe Oracle running on, I believe that's one that you don't need an additional license to run on Azure. When you get it from the Azure Marketplace, I believe it's just a straight database that you can add. Yeah, there we go. So you create an Oracle subscription. And yeah, you set up an Oracle subscription, and then you allocate an Oracle database, and you only pay for the database. So, however, there are other services that you do need to pay for an additional fee, additional subscription besides just the hosting. Datadog is this way. They have their services and monitoring and interactions that run on their systems. You need to pay them a subscription fee to use that. And then you need to pay for the services to be deployed and running on Azure. There's different subscription and licensing fees for different services. Mileage, your mileage may differ depending on which ones you choose. Eyes popped to your head when you first looked at Azure and had no idea what to do in there. I hear you. When I look at the Azure portal, the consistency, the ability to know that things like pricing, configuration, security are always in the same place, that the configuration is pretty consistent with the blades in the Azure portal, you're going to find and locate, and you'll get into a groove with how things build, develop, and stitch together. So, hey, Joey, is it Joey Rotors on YouTube? Welcome. Joey asks, how do you correctly pass secret variables to a .NET project? I add them as a parameter, and on the project, add as add environment. No, don't do that. Deploy with aspirate. The creds are shown in the gen files. Connection strings are not. Right. You're almost there, Joey. When so when you add a parameter and you pass them as an environment, don't pass them as using with environment. Use with reference. Right? If you use the with reference keyword, and you marked the parameter as secret, it should generate and make that a secret and hide it in the deployment scripts. So, Azure Web App Service supports multiple container apps. Yes, it does. Hello, Smiley Face on YouTube. Hello. I don't quite know how to address I guess I'm gonna say Smiley Face here. I can't believe YouTube allowed you to have that as a screen name, but okay. What's the best way to encode a Huffman tree in binary data? I'm sorry, we don't do homework here on the stream. Sorry. There are plenty of places that you can find that. I know a magnificent search engine that can help you with that. It's called Bing. And if you're searching on Bing and doing that, you'll even get paid to do it using Bing rewards. Check it out. You'll get a gift card to the Starbucks on campus that you can that you can use after you search for a little bit over a month. So yeah, ask chat.bing.com. There you go. You'll look into it, willing to pay, but trying to figure out how to convince supervisor to try Aspire. An S1 web app is sufficient for your needs. Fantastic. If you're using an S1 web app, that's more expensive than an Azure container app. That has similar interactions. So like, take a look. You'll find success with this. Where is it? Container. Go find the container apps. Right. Pricing, pay as you go. Yes. And the consumption plan, it's really confusing to read. Not gonna lie. The Azure Container Apps pricing page is confusing to read because it shows you tenths of a cent, hundredths of a cent, 2.4 thousandths of a cent per virtual CPU second that you are using. And it's 3 10,000ths of a cent per gigabyte, not gigabyte, gigabyte of memory second that you use. Oh boy. It takes a lot to use all of that. So, and right, I'd love to see the pricing page have something that shows a little bit more of a realistic scenario in numbers to show you, here's how much it costs. Here's something that's a little bit more realistic. Hey, this might be running across a half dozen containers at various times, and because it is, it's using this much memory, this much processor, and costs X amount of dollars American. Is it true that the front end of Bing is a Blazor app? No, that's not true. No. It'd be cool if it was. That's not true. No. Parts of Bing, though, significant parts of Bing, are managed by ASP.NET Core servers, Kestrel servers out there running it. So, particularly, and there's blog posts about the advertising serving services out there are built on Bing with built for Bing using Kestrel. Right, dev blogs, Microsoft, Bing on .NET 8. So there's a great article about how much performance improvement they saw, how much it cut their database usage, and reducing the cost of goods for running a service like Bing by 20% literally saves the company millions of dollars in processing power. Millions of dollars. There's a new free offer with Azure Database. I was just looking at the free offers on the Azure website. I don't see it here looking at the free services. Tell me more. Because, yeah, I don't see anything. It's not on the top 6 that's listed here. What's the free offer? Walter says on Azure you get a monthly bill. Can you get real-time cost information so you can turn on a particular workload? Yes. There is I believe there's a billing API that you can dive into. And you can query and interact with. So, absolutely, you can do that. If not, there is a place you can go on the Azure portal and set things like budget limits so you can dial up and dial down services appropriately. Can I convert a parameter resource to a resource with a connection stringer? Sure, it's possible. Or do you need an extra NuGet package? I'm nearly positive it's possible because I'll go back to the Aspirify.net example. Aspirify.net lets me log in with a Microsoft account. The client ID and client secret for that Microsoft account are sitting in a vault. They do not get published. Are your parameters marked as secrets when you create them? There's an optional argument when you create a parameter to define something as a secret. I would be curious about if that is set inside your project. I'm just bringing up and looking at the source code for Aspirify real quick. Because... yeah. I have these marked as secrets, so they don't get serialized. I'm using Bicep, and it will publish and put that. It puts it into a vault. It does not touch the. It prompts me for it during deployment, and it puts it into the vault directly. So, I don't have that code for those values sitting locally here. So, hey, I've received 100 messages. Look at that. What's this stream for? Nothing. What you doing? We're talking about .NET Aspire. We're going to get in and write a little bit of code. We're going to revisit the Big Bad blog sample, get back up to speed on some of the things there, and I want to hear some of your questions, some of your interactions here that you may have had with .NET Aspire, so we can help make sure that you're successful and we grow and get into some more of the demos, some more of the samples that we're going to build and work with here on the stream. Yes, I am a father. I am a father of 2 daughters. How you doing there? When using Copilot in Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code, is there a shortcut, asks Marcus, or a button to go to the beginning or the start of the question? Oh, that sounds like an accessibility issue. Button or keystroke to return to the beginning of the question. in Copilot in VS Code? Let me take that to my Visual Studio folks. That is a really good question. I don't know if there is. I would think just the home key would get you there. Manually scrolling feels like a pain in the neck. You shouldn't have to do that. Let's open a usability issue there and get you some help with that. Yeah, you like that low viz? Frank says, get 100,000 vCore seconds of compute every month for Azure SQL database. Yes, Azure SQL does have... Yes, I have seen that offer. And why does clicking on it not open Azure SQL? And actually, it's not on the list when you click it open. Yeah. It's not on the list when you open the list of free products. So that's annoying. So I'm on the free services website. So this looks like a bug in the website. And you click on Azure SQL database and you scroll down to Azure SQL. It doesn't list that offer. It's quite literally on the page just before it. 700. It says 750 vCore hours per month with 32 gig of storage, but that's not what it says here. It says 100,000 vCore seconds. So, secret. You get argument 2. Can I convert from? Okay. You can scroll by voice. Okay. Like this month new? Yeah, they missed an entry on the website. So, what's the difference then between 100,000 vCore seconds and 750 hours free? Like, it feels like they dropped that. Right? I'm going to take out calculator for a second. Right? Thinking out loud with a calculator. Right? 750 hours is 2.7 million seconds. I don't think that's a new offer. I think that's they slashed their offer by 99%. If I'm understanding that properly. 99.5%. Let me know. Just doing back of the napkin math. No, I'm looking at the front page of, right? I'm looking at the front. There's the link I shared. It shows the offer in the third box on screen. But when you click into that Azure SQL database, the only Azure SQL that's shown shows 750 vCore hours per month with 32 gig of storage. So, they may want to fix that. Is there a solution to display an external web page in Blazor Spa without using an iframe? An external web page. Well, how would you do that if it was if you were using JavaScript or some other technology? You got to use an iframe to embed another website in a website. Like, it's kind of how that works. So, just like I said, Frank, doing the back of the napkin math, 750 hours is 2.7 million seconds. I'd want to learn more about that. It feels like there's something missing there. Something doesn't add up. And like I said, I'm doing back of the napkin math. We've gone a bit longer with our AMA, and I'm okay with that. I want to make sure that we dive in and we take a look at some of the things for the Big Bad blog. I'm going to go back and kind of refresh our memories where we are with it right now. Let me head over to the code, and we can talk about some of this, and start talking about a little bit about how Key Vault plugs into this. I don't have my screen set up all the way. There we go. So we've been working on this idea, this blog series, building a blog, working with it. There we go. Look there. See, there's the and over here, this is the big bad blog. Close everybody else. So the link is there in the YouTube description. I'll share this link again for folks. Mr. 480, hello. And there's a whole bunch of writing to support this, right? Talking about the blog project and how to get .NET Aspire configured. I should probably go back and update these for .NET Aspire 8.1. There's dozens of pages here about working with databases and entity framework. A lot of really great content to get you started. And I'm working on episode 4 right now, and there's more coming with that. I actually have chunks of episode 5 done because I started working on doing things with telemetry, and as I was going through and working on that with telemetry and logging, I realized it didn't fit the story we were trying to tell about upgrading and growing this, where I need to actually start logging in and creating content. So that we'll have more about episode 4 next time. But the idea here is simple. Our friend Arthur, the author, wrote a simple blog engine with C# and ASP.NET Core Razor pages. Wanted to just write some notes in Markdown, publish using Bootstrap CSS, and have a nice little running blog that's hanging out there. This is my first post. This is the content of my first post. Hey, I think I'll order some pizza. I'm feeling lazy, so I think I'll order some pizza. Not sure what I want. There's a really cool new pizza shop that opened down the street called Blazing Pizza. I think I'll give them a try. So there are little Markdown files sitting out there inside of a web application, but we want to grow this and let some of Arthur's friends, Annie, Chris, and Tyler, get in and start being able to use and blog with our friend Arthur. So the idea is we're growing this simple blog engine. So when I look over here inside of, and there you can see how I have the IDs, the resources there. And right, if I go back to Big Bad Blog, there it is. We can see how this application grew. Let me back up just a second. To, where did it go? To Joey's question. If I open up and I look at, not that website. There's the Aspirify website. Give me 1 second here. So I actually generate and save all the bicep files to disk for this. And it is in the app host project. I can show you some of the bicep files for this that make this thing run. Yeah, let me open the web. So when the bicep file is generated, and I know you're saying you're using Aspirate to generate content for Kubernetes. We want to improve the Kubernetes experience. There's a lot more to be done over there, but right now it's a community project, so we need to kind of bring that into the fold and improve it, and there's folks that are absolutely interested in helping on that. The bicep files that are generated, right, they do generate secured parameters here that reference and pull those values out of the Key Vault. The connection string to get into my database is it's formulating this, it's stitching it together and setting the database security, but it's grabbing a service binding and the secret output for that and deciding where to put it. So it's all sitting in secrets. That's what Bicep does. Aspirate might not do it all properly like that. Your mileage may vary, and it's something that we're working with them to try and improve. Okay, continuing on here. Say hello in Iran. Hello in Iran. Welcome. Great to see you. Hey, Test LA. Hello. So, when we have, as we've built this application, we started with just a website. Really? Is this just, I didn't update things in the, show me the vulnerabilities. Yeah, these are versions. There's been updates since, right? 181 to 190. I don't see a vulnerability indicator here. And that's for the entire solution, so I don't know what you're talking about. Anyways. So we started with just the website, but we've refactored, we've pulled things out, and we've made services. We have a Postgres database out here that we have things stored in. We have an app host that builds and allocates a post database here using Postgres. We moved that content. We showed how to move that content into a Mongo database. Where's here you go. So that we have an API that's sitting in front of a Mongo database, and we showed how to do that interaction. I need to kind of reconcile where these two fit together. And we have our website that knows how to reference and use these various parts. There's our Redis cache. And you see, with Redis Commander, we had that comment earlier about, wouldn't it be great if Azure Storage had a similar with Storage Explorer? Totally agree. To the question about being able to deploy Redis and use the Redis service in Azure, I'll show you how to do that real quick. So I can say add a .NET Aspire package. And if we look up Azure Redis, there is this package, Aspire hosting Azure Redis, that will allow you to connect to the appropriate location. Yes, yes, yes. We need to update. Right? That's fine. Yeah, go ahead, update all the things. I do have updates sitting queued for 4. Give me 1 second there. 2HDSS. We'll get back to you. See, I've got the... But where is... Pardon me. I don't see the indicator that there's an issue. Right? Like, one vulnerable package. Where is it? I don't see it. Yeah, now let's go back over here. Aspire, Aspire, Redis, no. Azure. Browse for it, there it is. Install that chalupa. Yes, do it. It's not running, it's okay. Alright. So now in here, not only can I do with Redis Commander, but I can say as Azure Redis. And I can provide additional configuration if I need to in there to specify information about how to configure it, where it should be running. Right, I could specify the SKU, I can specify, well, it knows to publish it as a connection string. So there are options available for you in there to be able to set that up however you need to. But we'll talk more about publishing another time. Let me go to this question. Is it possible to have a microservice and micro front end at the same time and the new Blazor template? Sure, absolutely. When I think about micro front ends and that type of approach, you're building components, you're building pages that live in some other assembly that are getting brought in, stitched in, added as another resource inside of your Blazor web app. And you're adding them to the routing so that those folders, those locations can be identified to load those pages. You're going to add resources that are appropriate for those other front ends, some sort of a add resources method call that you'll put so that dependencies can be loaded properly by dependency injection. That type of configuration absolutely can be done. So, do we have systematic documentation in Chinese? There is on Microsoft Learn, yes. I don't have them for this sample, no. But if you go, all of the official samples on Learn, Microsoft.com, where is it? There is a language. There is a language setting so that you can change them to dozens of languages that we support. So, but this sample does not. So, why do we have bicep to deploy GitHub Actions? You're not a fan of bicep syntax? No. You have GitHub Actions that use bicep to deploy. Different. I don't have a button to show only vulnerable. Okay, that one, yeah. Yeah, it's still the 8.0 version. It needs to be. There's patches up to 8.04. I thought there was an 8.07. But yep. I'll go through and update the source code so it's using the latest version of these. Quite frankly, I want to make some of these a sliding version number, so that, see, these are fine here, but yeah, that's a transitive package somebody's referencing, and it's getting pulled in, and it shouldn't be using that one. So it's got to be somewhere down the line that it's pulling in that version. Yeah, I'll find it and clear it out and get it updated. But not something that we need to talk about today. Okay. So, of course, when I run this, it starts up the app host, and it's going to show me the dashboard, show me the couple of services that we've already built, and we can get into. That was the 8.0 version. 8.04 is probably safe. But I like to make some of those dependencies sliding on the patch version, right? Major, minor, patch version when you look at a version number. Really, failed to start. Why'd you fail to start? It's there. Yeah, we need to load that in the solution. So we added and showed how to add projects into a .NET Aspire solution from outside of a solution. Real easy to do, but if you want to run them from inside of Visual Studio, you need to have them added to the solution. And once it's added to the solution, you're able to use this type of syntax here, where you just say, here it is out there on disk. Go load and run this thing. And that should load now. There we go. No. I added that. Where to go for the Redis cache? It's not as I want to do publish as Azure Redis. That's what I was thinking. As Azure Redis says, go use an Azure Redis instance. Don't use the local container. Yeah, there's the configure stuff I was looking for. So by saying publish as means that when we go and deploy, it'll actually use the content out there. This is 17.11. This is 17.12 preview. There we go. Now I can get in and get to the website. There it is. So we're going to work on and get this. We're actually going to make this disappear up here. You're not going to be able to register because you're going to be logging in with Keycloak to get in here. We'll get that set up. Hey, Napalm, hello. Is there support for .NET Aspire with Visual Studio Code? There is support with DevKit. .NET Aspire is intended to be very tool simplistic, so that you don't have to do very much with tools. A lot of stuff at the command line. The kinds of things that folks look for .NET Aspire to do, publishing applications, is not within the scope of .NET Aspire. Let's make sure we remember .NET Aspire is a developer tool that stops, right? The .NET Aspire ends at the deployment and continuous development experience. That's where another tool picks up the output. We saw Aspirate mentioned earlier. That's a tool that generates Kubernetes configuration files, Docker Compose files. Aspirate is a tool that will generate those and do that deployment for you. AZD is a tool that will do that for you. The Amazon Cloud Developer Kit will do that for you to get your content into AWS. So those tools, there is support in Visual Studio Code. For AZD, for .NET Aspire, there's nothing. There's a NuGet Explorer now in Visual Studio Code that you can use, but it's your choice. You don't need to do that. You can do everything still at the command line. Napalm's on an SSL crusade with aspiring custom components and finding it really frustrating. Yeah, no, I'm there with you on that, and it's not trivial. It's not. And some things you don't need to be because they're going to be behind your firewall inside your resource group when you deploy. So yes and no. So Test LA asks, why am I not using Edge? I like to spread the love and use different browsers. You'll see me use Edge. You'll see me. I prefer Firefox just because I like to keep things honest. I like to keep things looking at open standards and showing how those things work. But there's times you'll see me use Edge on stream. I bounce back and forth in my various browsers. It's an API gateway. Oh, that's different. That's different. And for the local development experience, you probably do want that just to verify that it works. On the Linux SSL configuration is just awful. It is a terrible experience. And that's just the nature of configuring certificates on just configuring certificates on Linux, then the security constraints you have to go through there. All right. So, when web developing, it's good practice to test in multiple browsers. Totally agree. Yep. That's why, if things work in Firefox, it's probably going to work in Edge and Chrome. Safari is a whole nother kettle of fish. The Apple folks are doing their own thing over there, and I don't know what they're doing. This application is getting data when you look at the index here, when it brings out the content. It is fetching data from an iPost repository, and we previously set that up. Wrong one. We previously set up that post repository so that it's getting it from a microservice. That microservice over here goes and fetches from an API. That API is connected and managed, and it has its own Mongo database that it saves and interacts with. So there's this nice set of indirection here so that you can see how things are persisted and managed. So, hey Mehmet, hello. Going well. So the next pieces that I was starting with to get things configured and running here and add authentication, because it's great that we have blog posts sitting out there in a database, but I want to control who can create those blog posts, who can edit those blog posts. And I started doing that with Keycloak. Keycloak is an identity provider tool. It's free and open source. Anybody can go and get your hands on it. Check it out at keycloak.org. There's all kinds of documentation about how to get this set up, how to work with it. But there is a getting started section here about how to work with Docker. And Docker is the magic front door to getting things working with .NET Aspire. Because this works with Docker, we can get it included with .NET Aspire. But I'll go you even one further. There is a .NET Aspire official package that you can add that will allow you to start up and manage a Keycloak instance. And Keycloak, think of it as your own private Active Directory or an Azure Entra ID that you can work with. So if I look for Aspire and Keycloak, so there's Aspire hosting Keycloak from the Microsoft folks, only 200 downloads. This is a preview version. However, this version is a version that the community built that has a couple more advanced options that are going to be coming into the official version here. They're working together to create an official Keycloak hosting service. So I'm going to go grab the community one, which is a little bit more further along in setting up some of those capabilities. And what we can do is we can start setting up a security database for this. So let's call this Keycloak auth, right? So that's not a thing. That's not a thing. No, that's add Keycloak container. There's the name of the container, and I'll press comma here. It doesn't have a username and password that you specify by default here. You see username equals null up there. There's a null for the password. If you don't provide them, it defaults to admin as the username and admin as the password. It's important to specify with data volume so it saves your configuration to disk. And then I can add that reference over here, and now the website knows about Keycloak. Let's take a look and learn a little bit more about this. Where is that? Hey, Nikita on YouTube. Let me come back to that question in just a second. So here's Keycloak, and you can see the log, how it's set up and running out here. If we dig into that now, did I I didn't force. Let me stop this. It's kind of important to force a port on this, and I like to force it to 8080 because you don't want the login and the cookie to float between different ports when you're in development. You want it to be fixed to a specific port, right? If it moves, your login will break between restarts of the application. But here's Keycloak starting up. There we go. So if I log in with admin, it brings me into the administrator UI, and I have a realm. There's I've already started setting up a second realm here, right? There's the master realm that everything starts from, and then you can set up additional realms. Yeah, create realm, there it is. And name, think of this like a tenant inside of Azure Entra ID or Active Directory. And you can create a realm here. And I've already created one for the Big Bad blog. And we can see the settings down here, the ID, and we can call this blog management system. Big Bad blog CMS, right? And I can add some more information in here. So there's all kinds of configuration that I can put in here. Is user registration enabled? Is there a forgot password capability? So on and so forth to allow these interactions. What does the emails look like that come out of this? You can build, deploy, and run this for your system if you'd like. When you run it here locally in a container, it persists things to a volume on disk. If you wanted to actually save this somewhere, there is a way to set this up so that, well, you can load in other identity providers, but there is a way to set this up so that it saves using a Postgres database and it persists that content. Importantly, you want to create a user. We need to create a first user to be able to log in. So I created our friend Arthur the author. There they are, Arthur author. And you can see the username. I created a faux email address and name. I also added, they're in the default there, but I added they're a member of the owners group. I created a group. It's a group of users, but this will appear as a role inside the application when we get Arthur set up to log in. Let me pause for a second, go back to questions there in chat. I'm actually just about out of time. We're going to do more with Keycloak next time with a fully fleshed out set of samples and content to go after this. I ran into a bunch of problems getting this wired into the application. But let me come back over here and let's take a look at some more of these questions. Nikita on YouTube asks about Instant API, the Instant API library that we were working on some time ago as minimal APIs were coming out. Has that been suspended? What's the story with it? Yeah, it was suspended because there were some new features that came out around generating that code by default sitting in Visual Studio. So it didn't really make sense to go and build this library when there's a code gen feature that's built into Visual Studio to do that for you. So yeah, we can probably put a notice on there that, hey, this feature is available. So we've suspended development. So I will take that as an action item. Let me see here. Cool. All right. And I saw the questions and discussion about SSL. That's all the time that I have for today. I love answering questions. I love talking through and getting into some of these topics and hopefully helping you get more successful. We started adding Keycloak to our project. We just added a container to this. We saw And we answered some of the other questions about setting up Azure hosting capabilities, particularly for Azure Redis, so that we publish as Azure Redis. I made the mistake of saying as Azure Redis inside of our application. As Azure Redis will actually connect and use an Azure Redis instance while you're interacting with building and using the application in a development mode. By saying publish as means that when you finish, you compile and you deploy. When it gets to production, it'll manage and allocate and work with that Azure Redis instance that's out there. You're welcome, Nikita. I wish I had better news for you, but yeah, it was something that we tabled because there was a better tool out there that's being managed by the .NET team, by the Visual Studio folks, to do the exact same thing. Generate that code, write it out, and give you a whole lot more options. So, but for now, I think it's time for me to call it a day here, to wrap up. And come on. You're supposed to be playing the music. Why aren't you playing the music? Well, that's annoying. It's on the wrong output. Yeah, look at that. Actually, that's not it either. Really? How did that get muted? Like, is there a mute button here that I don't know I'm hitting? There must be. Because somehow my audio is getting muted, and yeah. It's right there. There we go. Fantastic. I'll have a lot more for you next week. I'm going to be updating some of the documentation in the Big Bad blog, adding some more samples. There's a bunch that I want to do there. I've got your feedback about questions and samples that you're looking for. Hashy Vault, PG Vector, support in Postgres, .NET Aspire. How do we run it on the cheap in Azure? Building and deploying .NET Aspire on App Service. And some questions about instant APIs. I'll get some more information about that put together. Don't let Java win the graph database game. Okay. All right. I hear you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let me see who else is streaming on the big Twitch TV network that I can get you connected to that's doing something fun, something interesting. Let me send you... Oh, my goodness. Let me get you connected. Somebody else is working with Aspire today. Let me get you connected to our friend Layla Codes It. She's a developer in the UK, building a website right now. She's an expert in .NET Aspire as well. She's going to be over there talking about, building websites. She's working on building a workshop she's going to be teaching at NDC coming up here. Thank you so much, friends, for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, there's lots of great videos here on the .NET channel. Check them out down below. Over there, there's all kinds of great stuff. Make sure you take a look at the videos from .NET Aspire Developers Day. It was a full 8-hour day we had. There's videos from the individual sessions that are being published that you can check out now. And if you're on Twitch, get ready to say hi to our friend Layla Codes It, and I will see you tomorrow on my live stream. We'll be back here next Wednesday answering questions, building and using .NET Aspire for the Big Bad blog. Have a great rest of your day wherever you might be. I wish you good health and good coding. Take care.